America's foremost space physicist has said that the world's first trillionaire will be the person to first mine asteroids successfully. Space ready now to be exploited both commercially and, as we've heard from the White House recently, militarily. Who's going to reap the rewards or the whirlwind? And are space wars coming not just to a cinema near you, but to your everyday life? This is Roundtable. I'm David Foster. Okay, welcome to the programme. This is the first of two shows about space. In the second, we'll be looking at the US plans to create a sixth branch of the military, a space force. Today, though, we're looking at what it means monetarily. No longer the final frontier. Space is becoming an arena of contest and competition. Last month, the US Vice President Mike Pence announced plans for a military space force to be operational by 2020. So are we seeing a new arms race, with the US pitted against Russia and China? And if so, has it been launched to ensure national claims to valuable resources in space? Conventional wisdom has had it that armies needed soldiers on the ground, backed up by a navy at sea, as well as forces in the air. But a whole new domain is opening up: space. Donald Trump could not have been more emphatic about the change in US policy.
It is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space.
China, Russia, and North Korea are understood to be testing space weapons. These include lasers that can knock out satellites, electromagnetic pulse weapons in space to knock out power grids on Earth, as well as satellites that can target other satellites in orbit. Until recently, there had been little to fight for in space, but things look set to change in the coming years. Asteroids can range from 1 meter to hundreds of kilometers across. Many contain iron and nickel, as well as precious metals like platinum and iridium. And the eminent American physicist Michio Kaku has called asteroids flying gold mines in outer space. Some 17,000 asteroids are classified as near-Earth objects, meaning they cross the Earth's path. One asteroid a kilometer across contains platinum to the value of $5.4 trillion. Some of the raw materials might not be cost-effective to bring back to Earth, but could be used to build more mining facilities in space. But the real boon could be water. Found in many asteroids, it's broken down into hydrogen and oxygen, the main ingredients of rocket fuel. 2 American companies are already working on spacecraft to extract minerals from asteroids. One of them, Planetary Resources, said it intends to add trillions of dollars to global GDP.
3, 2, 1, 0.
So the race is on both the military and commercial fronts. Currently, only the United States and tiny Luxembourg have legislated for the commercial exploitation of space. But with space resources able to reshape the global economy, shouldn't humanity look to global frameworks instead of retrenching into national silos? Okay, so let's get cracking. I'm pleased to say that joining us at the round table we have Mitch Hunter-Scalion, the founder of the Asteroid Mining Corporation. Big plans there. We'll investigate those. We have Frans van der Donk, space professor of space law, to be more exact, at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Sarah Cruddas is here. Among other things, a space journalist and involved in advising some people who have some money to spend in space as well. We'll talk about that, Sarah, a little bit later on. Mark Hempsell, also here with us, former president of the British Interplanetary Society. A flying gold mine, Mitch. Is that what you're aiming for?
A flying platinum mine, perhaps. I mean, asteroids are filled with platinum group metals, and we only mine 200 tonnes of platinum a year, so it makes sense to go and mine it in space, where you can find 10 times of that in just one asteroid.
Makes sense. Jolly difficult there.
Well, of course, everything's difficult in the space industry, but that doesn't mean it's not worthwhile.
So how are you going to do it?
Well, sort of, you start by prospecting for asteroids. You look for platinum within the asteroids and platinum group metals, and then once you have that sort of basic data infrastructure, you can then move on to the actual sort of physical extraction technology. With physical extraction technology, you can look to then sort of say, this asteroid X, for example, we know this contains 100 tonnes of platinum. That's half the world's annual supply. That's a viable candidate for mining.
Okay, I'm sure everybody else has got questions they'd like to throw at you as well, and please feel free to do so. But I want this one. Okay, it's all very well saying it looks like there's money in them there hills, as they used to say, gold in them there hills. When you're looking at something that's flying at 200,000 miles an hour, maybe more, it's difficult to pinpoint. How on earth are you going to physically do this?
Well, we only look at the near-Earth asteroids, which are the ones which are orbiting closest to the Earth. So with them, some of them are actually easier to get to from an energetic perspective than the Moon. So they are essentially the closest, lowest hanging fruit in the solar system for us to exploit economically.
Make sense to anybody here?
I think you've been reading some books from America. I think all of this sounds ridiculous if you're not within the space industry, because it sounds like science fiction. But if you go back 100 years, no one could have even begun to imagine the world we live in today. In fact, some of the imaginations, everything from War of the Worlds to predictions of like telescreens, and we now have, you know, Skype and video calls. A lot of these things do come true, and it's like anything throughout history. We are within a new gold rush. Fortunes will be lost, fortunes will be made. Ideas sound ridiculous now. Some people have the same ideas. Many won't succeed, but some people will succeed. The biggest barrier we have at the moment, and it's probably something you agree with, is actually access to launch. It's hugely expensive to get to space, but companies such as Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos' company, SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's company, and other companies as well, are actually working to reduce the cost of access to launch. And then once you do that, anyone with an idea, a kid in the dorm room, such as with Facebook and the internet.
And that's where you got your first idea, wasn't it, when you were a kid in the dorm room?
I was indeed. I was still in university.
Frans, I'm going to come to you in a moment, if I may, about the law. Sure. Jump in at any time. But Mark, let me ask you this. He's talking about the potential in these near-Earth objects. The fact is, resources on Earth are finite. Is that where the next...
Yes, I mean, logically, it's you know, at some point it's got to happen in human history. And I think if you look at the exponential growth of our need for energy, our need for materials and everything, that time has got to be soon, you know, within decades of exploiting space to get both our energy and a large chunk of our raw materials. The holding point, as Sarah's just pointed out, is the infrastructure which should have been in place if we'd invested properly, and is not in place to really support it.
When you say we should have done, do you mean the UK?
I think everybody.
Yeah?
I think the space industry, at the moment, the best launch vehicle in the world in terms of reliability, ability to launch humans, accessibility, is the Soyuz launcher. That is the launcher that launched Sputnik 1 back in 1957. We have had 60 years, trillions of dollars invested, and we have made no improvement in the launch infrastructure to all intents and purposes. So we are relying a little bit on SpaceX and Blue Origin, and hopefully still reaction engines and Skylon, if I can give the British a plug. But even those systems are not really at the cost level and the scale level that would be needed to do this thing effectively.
Sarah, I know you're dying to say something.
No,
can I come to bring Frans into this discussion, because you were sort of...
I know I'm the lawyer. I'm always last. I know my place. That's no problem. But
that's
go
because
ahead.
you're writing out your invoice.
Probably.
As a lawyer.
Yeah. But it will be cheaper if you ask me beforehand than if you consult me afterwards. So that's why I'm happy to be at this table. Obviously, as a lawyer, I can't judge any of these scientific and operational plans. So I have to follow the wisdom of the people around the table and others that this is something seriously going to happen. But it is important, in addition to bringing down the launch costs, to make sure that these investments are secured in any sense. I mean, if you want to invest hundreds of millions in a company, you want to make sure that whatever benefits you reap, you can rightfully claim those to be yours. And that's where the law comes in. So I do think it's also an important factor in making these things happen.
What does the Treaty of Outer Space say about this? Back in 1967 that was sorted, wasn't it?
And unfortunately nobody at the time thought that this might be a realistic opportunity. So the treaty doesn't really say anything about space mining. It only provides for a very general principle in Article 2, which states that no state can appropriate any part of outer space. So no state, whether it's the United States or Russia or any other state, can say to an asteroid, this is part of the United States and I'm the one who's going to exclusively determine who can mine the resources on that. Now the problem with that general phrase is that you can interpret it both ways. You can say this looks like something belonging to all of mankind, so we should create a regime which allows for the sharing of the benefits with all of mankind, which is a quasi-socialist system if you want. Or you can go the other way and saying, well, it's a global commons, so everybody is free to tap into that, to benefit from that, as long as they comply with certain rules of international law.
And that could lead to a free-for-all.
If we do not readily come to an agreement on one or the other, that will be the risk, absolutely.
You wanted to say something, Sarah, now's your time.
Just want to chime in. I think what we're actually seeing here is it's not just about asteroid mining, it's not just about law. We're creating a new market. This is market creation. You can think of space no longer as being a place to go, but a place to do business. So at the moment, in terms of asteroid mining, one of the things is it's almost like maritime law, so it's finders keepers. That is going to change, and I think you need some flexibility when you're creating a new industry. I think there's a lot which is going to change in terms of regulation, but it's not just about mining asteroids, it's not just about space tourism, it's about potentially manufacturing in space to actually benefit life on Earth. It's about, you think of hardware all the time, but actually it's about software. Data is king in the world we live in today, and it's going to become king as we continue to go forward in space. There's already so much information being gathered from these satellites which orbit Earth that we can't even process it yet. So there's a lot of money and a lot of businesses.
And we'll talk about the satellites more in the military side of things. But you mentioned Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
And I know that you've been involved in talking to him or his people about space, and the same perhaps with Bill Gates. When you hear a plan such as Mitch's one here, and what we're talking about, £7,000 only raised in crowdfunding so far, I'll ask you about that in a bit, but not very much money, and you have billionaires talking about it. They're going to get there first, aren't they?
I think they're all doing different things. So, for example, someone like Jeff Bezos, he's probably the richest man in the world, debatable, but he's looking at giving back to the world in order to reduce the cost of access to space. Someone like Elon Musk is a NASA government contractor. He's still doing incredible things, but his money comes from NASA. His money in terms of funding launches comes from NASA. People like Jeff Bezos are reducing the cost of access to space for the benefit of all humanity. So we're seeing a change in things, and I sit on a lot of panels in America. I work with investors, and of course people want money and people want returns on their investments. No one, unless you're a philanthropist, and you do have them out there in terms of space, is going to chuck in money if there's not a decent business model. Asteroid mining isn't going to happen within the next decade, and it's more likely to be used for fuel and stuff like that. But it's acceptable to have an idea, just like Zuckerberg and the rest who founded Facebook had.
Go for it, Mitch, because
I would disagree
you're laying out
there, to be honest. I mean, we're looking at sending up our first prospecting satellite in 2020, purely because the UK is one of the cheapest places to build satellites on the planet now. And once the prospecting mission's done, essentially you're looking at a period where we have all the ingredients for a gold rush ready to be in place. That's probably the phase where you're starting to see the serious capital coming into the space mining industry.
So just take me through this, if you would. A prospecting craft to go up there.
Yes.
So it's effectively going to go up there and take a little bit of stuff off the asteroid, bring it back.
No, not even that. It's a low Earth orbit satellite which just does the spectral survey of the near-Earth asteroids.
Okay, so it'll be able to check it out.
Yeah, it's looking to categorise 5,000 near-Earth asteroids and just see what their compositions are.
What's your market in terms of people who want to buy what you bring back?
Well, initially at least our business model is based upon data. So, I mean, the data infrastructure for platinum mining is, sort of some of the major platinum mining businesses have sort of exploration budgets in the region of hundreds of millions of pounds annually. So when you're thinking about sort of potentially introducing a massive stream of platinum into the global supply, then they're obviously one of our target customer segments. There's also academia. I mean, the raw spectral data on near-Earth asteroids is absolutely scant at the minute. So being able to have even just a basic data set on near-Earth asteroids is something that we currently don't have, and it's the commercialised science which is going to be able to provide that.
One
goes back to
of
the
you
point
two,
about data being
or
king.
either, or maybe perhaps both of you. You see, I see a problem with this, and this may be a legal problem, it may just be an ethical problem.
I'm sure it's
which is
partly
bringing
at least.
something back to Earth from outer space. The dangers of that, how are you going to prevent
I
cross-contamination?
don't think there's any dangers involved. The only possible location would be Mars, and I doubt that. It's just platinum. You'd be hard pushed to distinguish between the platinum he produces and the platinum you've dug out of the Earth. There may be some
But that
subtle
asteroid's
isotopic.
been places, hasn't it? That,
No, it's been hanging around the
Right.
sun for 4.5 billion years, cooking nicely.
And
so nobody need worry about what you could bring back
There's
to Earth. Just
no
make a fortune
aliens
out of it.
involved. No, it's all perfectly safe.
And legally, you
Well, it legally raises some interesting implications as well. On the one hand, there is the discussion, is this legal at all to go there and under what circumstances? But if you talk about the Earth market in platinum, there is a general understanding that platinum is a valid product for international trade and trade and commerce. It's not like blood diamonds or something like that, which is illegal. So, and then there is an interesting provision under the WTO which says that if somebody brings back a like product to the market, like to platinum, it should enjoy the same benefits. So here you have somebody potentially bringing platinum back to the market, which is a like product, so it should enjoy the benefits of free trade. At the same time, there may be debates about the valid originality or the validity, the legitimacy of the original source.
Sarah, did you want to jump in on that, or can I ask you
Always.
about space for humanity,
We can
something
discuss
you're
that.
working on, which is making it possible for me, anybody else around this table, other people, to perhaps go up into space? That's another commercial side of things.
Well, that's correct. One of the commercial, it's the point of you need to stop thinking about space as a place to go. It is a place to do business, and you can have so many ideas we can't even begin to imagine them yet. And one of the things which is happening is people have been thinking about space tourism, and obviously it is no different to what happened with aviation 100 years ago. You know, you had the Wright brothers, and one of the Wright brothers said at the time he could not see the use for the aeroplane. And we live in a world transformed by aviation, and of course, going on a flight back in the 1920s was hugely expensive, and then that price came down, and it transformed the world. It made the world a smaller place, and we're seeing the same now in terms of space tourism. At the moment, the actual number of people who could afford to go into space with these flights when they're in excess of $250,000 is going to be the high net worth individuals, because it's a certain percentage of your income you're willing to spend. That is eventually going to go down if history is, history does tend to repeat itself. One of the organisations I'm working with, so I'm a director of a non-profit called Space for Humanity, and that's looking at actually funding ordinary citizens, people who might not have that money to go into space, because at the moment fewer than 600 human beings have experienced the Earth from above. 24 have experienced the Earth from the moon. But imagine if that number was 6,000 or 600,000. Imagine if that wasn't just elite Americans or Russian astronauts, but it was someone from a small community who might not understand how space relates to their life, because so often...
Or politicians who start realizing that we all live on this small, very, very vulnerable planet, and that borders cannot be seen from outer space.
Or perhaps politicians that we'd like to buy a one-way ticket for.
I wasn't going to mention that. As a lawyer, I'm
it's a
not supposed to say that, but you're obviously right.
It could transform life on Earth. I mean, so Space for Humanity is offering people to apply in order to explain how that will transform their community when they come back.
Okay,
Because going
Space for Humanity is what they should get.
There's a very important point here. In fact, two. The first critical point is that the perception, at least I think in most people's minds up until the mid-1980s, is that yes, space tourism would happen, but it would be one of the last things that happens in space. You'd have all the other stuff first. A guy called David Ashford gave the paper, I'm pleased to say at the BIS, the British Interplanetary Society, in the mid-1980s, when he just looked at which will be first, and he showed quite convincingly that space tourism is almost the first of the major new applications in space, not one of the last. And as Sarah's pointed out, what that means is that instead of the space industry trying to think how you use the infrastructure that the space is put into place, which is a little like asking Balfour Beatty everything that's going to be done with the traffic on the roads that they're constructing, we actually have the wider community experiencing space. And again, as Sarah's pointed out, probably the very people you want to have their imagination sparked about what they can do.
See, this isn't just about money, Mitch, is it? I mean, it's something that you were dreaming.
Well, of course it is.
Not an impossible dream, but it's space that captivates.
I mean, sort of my motivation of all this, I mean, I know we're talking about trillions of pounds of revenue here, but my motivation is to allow humanity to move out into space, and I truly believe that sort of asteroid mining is the key technology which will allow people to move beyond the Earth and allow us to sort of start habitating the Moon, moving towards Mars, Europa, Titan. It has to come from sort of having the infrastructure in place, and that infrastructure is asteroid mining.
And it has, going back to a point made earlier, it requires lowering the access to space in terms of money. And that's, of course, where space tourism also can play a major role. I mean, if they develop the technology, flying people who are still willing to some extent to risk their lives because it won't be absolutely safe, right? It's still risky, but they can use that to validate the technology. 12 years ago, I spoke to Willie Whitehorn, who was then starting up Virgin Galactic, and he said his plan was to, by the time that the pool of millionaires able to pay for $250,000 for a trip was dried up, and you only get so many new millionaires every year. They had 50,000 flights under their, or they would have 50,000 flights under the belt. The technology would have improved, and then they could have fly much cheaper to space or Earth-to-Earth trajectories. And that's, of course, where we hope to bring down the costs. And if you see how the space the X Prize was won, that was pretty cheap technology compared to the huge launches that we were used to. So maybe that's the solution.
So we may end up with budget space.
I think you've got to put a warning in here. Although it is technologically much simpler to do suborbital tourism, which is what Virgin Galactic could do.
Suborbital, I was talking about this earlier. It doesn't mean it's below it all. It means it goes up and comes down.
It goes up, hello space, and then you plummet back down.
Okay,
right?
absolutely.
It's 25 times easier to do than to get into orbit, but it's also more difficult to make the business case. And there was theoretical papers done, particularly by John Olds in the United States, which rather indicated that suborbital tourism cannot become a viable economic industry, whereas orbital tourism probably can, because it's piggybacking on a wider market for orbital access.
Can I ask a question at this point? Other than space tourism, which we've talked about quite extensively, other than mining asteroids, what other commercial applications does space have?
Data, 3D printing in space. You've got companies like Made in Space, which are, you know, imagine there's a great example of an astronaut, Butch Wilmot, who, while he was in space on the space station, he lost his ratchet. You lose things in space, there's no gravity. And instead of having to wait for a resupply ship, he had one 3D printed in space. Now imagine, you've heard of the story of Apollo 13. With what happened there. Imagine if they just could have 3D printed all their missing parts. So instead of having, if you've seen the movie, to fit a square peg into a round hole, they could have 3D printed one. 3D print, you know, what we've done throughout history, when Columbus sailed to America and then later the Mayflower, is humans lived off the land. They didn't take the kitchen sink with them. So having the facilities to mine asteroids, to continue being in space, not just bring the wealth back to Earth, but also to work in 3D printing, to create things that you need, everything from medical devices. You can't even begin to imagine how much there is to come from space.
So as we contemplate the next program, which is going to be about the militarization of space, from a commercial point of view, do any of you see potential problems in the monetary value being something to be fought over in space?
Largely not, because it's such a large resource that there's something for everybody. There is no need to compete for anything because there is so much of that resource there.
I would disagree with that quite sort of full-heartedly, to be honest.
I would be careful about that as well. I mean, obviously there are many asteroids out there, but some are obviously low-hanging fruit or lower-hanging fruit. And we thought the same when it came to using the geostationary orbit for satellites. And the original idea, I'm sorry, I'm talking legally here, was first come, first serve, you know. When you were ready to launch a satellite and use a geostationary spot and with the frequency, you were ready to go. And then we started realizing if it continues in this fashion and with this rapidity, before we know it, all the slots are occupied and only a handful of countries are able to use that. So we switched to a partial system where we have pre-reserved certain slots for every country, to use, because the idea is still that it is a global commons. So when it comes to outer space resources, there may be a point in time when we come to realize, well, the easy ones are all taken now. We have to make sure that we allow others also to take somewhat less easy ones.
What do you think of that?
I think in the longer term it's quite right, yes. Every resource eventually is not enough. Because we've got
all
exponential
finite,
growth.
aren't they, I suppose, except
but in the
actually
early stages, I think it's not like instantly there will be great fighting over resources. The geostationary actually is a point that it is now the most crowded place in space. We might not even have geostationary orbit soon because of a Kessler syndrome in geostationary orbit. So,
Sarah, I know you want to say something very quickly, but Mitch is going to be leaving us at the end of this particular program, so let's give him the final word.
Right.
Where do you think you're going to be in 5 minutes? 5 minutes. 5 years. 5 years' time.
Well, 5 years from now would be 2023, so by that point we'd be looking to be sending a prospecting satellite up to an asteroid and conducting close-up analysis of the composition of that asteroid.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Good luck with the Asteroid Mining Company. Come and tell us how it's going. Even if it's not on air, keep us up to speed, and we'll see how it goes. The rest of you, the three of you who are here, are going to stay with us. In part 2 of this program, we're going to be hearing from an astronaut who's talking about space and the militarization of it. We're also going to be hearing from a brigadier general, former Undersecretary of State for George W. Bush, who thinks it is a very good idea and not something to be dismissed just because it's come from Donald Trump. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us on the panel. We'll see you next time. Space Part 2 coming up in 24 hours.